The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker, reflecting the neon lights of the city in puddles that looked like spilled oil. Inside the Gilded Olive, an Italian restaurant that catered to the city's elite, the atmosphere was a fortress against the storm outside. Here, the air smelled of truffles, aged balsamic, and old money. Clara Mitchell adjusted the apron around her waist, wincing slightly. Her feet throbbed, a dull, rhythmic ache that she had learned to ignore after 3 years of working double shifts. She was 32, but the shadows under her eyes and the roughness of her hands told the story of a woman who had lived 100 years of worry. She picked up a tray, balancing 3 heavy plates of ossobuco, her eyes scanning the dining floor. It was a habit she couldn't break: hyper-vigilance. Ever since David died, ever since she was left alone with 4-year-old Emily, Clara analyzed every room she entered. She looked for exits. She looked for threats. In the far corner, occupying the booth with the best vantage point of the entrance, sat Nikolai Volkov. Even the waitstaff whispered his name with a mixture of reverence and terror. Nikolai was not merely a businessman. He was an institution in Chicago's underworld. He was a man who moved in silence, his power defined not by how loud he shouted, but by how quiet the room became when he entered it. He was handsome in a severe, sharp-edged way, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Clara made in a year. Tonight, he was alone, save for his bodyguard, Victor, who stood by the wall like a stone statue. Clara moved toward his table. It wasn't her section, but the manager, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, had pulled the regular server off the floor. "Take table 4, Henderson had hissed, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Just drop the food and leave. Don't make eye contact." Clara had nodded, taking the plate intended for Nikolai. As she walked, the kitchen door swung open. The usual clamor of pots and pans was there, but something was wrong. Through the swinging porthole window, Clara saw movement that didn't fit. The regular head chef, an erratic but passionate man named Marco, was missing. Instead, 2 men she didn't recognize were at the prep station. They weren't wearing chef's whites. They wore dark, tight-fitting shirts and latex gloves. Clara slowed her pace. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. She recognized one of them. Not by name, but by the scar running down his neck. She had seen him 2 years ago, standing in the warehouse district, the night the police told her David's death was a random mugging gone wrong. That man had been watching from the shadows then. Now, he was garnishing Nikolai Volkov's pasta. She watched, frozen in the corridor between the kitchen and the dining room, as the scarred man pulled a small, clear vial from his pocket. With a precision that was terrifyingly calm, he let 3 drops of a clear liquid fall onto the steaming sauce. He stirred it once, wiped the rim of the plate, and set it on the pass. A waiter, oblivious, picked it up. Clara's mind raced. The survival instinct that had kept her and Emily alive screamed at her to turn around. Walk away. Go to the break room. Pretend you saw nothing. If you intervene, you die. If you speak, you die. But then she thought of Emily, waiting at her neighbor's apartment. She thought of the world Emily was growing up in, a world where bad men did bad things and good people looked away because it was safer. The waiter was approaching table 4. Nikolai was looking down at his phone, unbothered. Clara didn't decide to move. Her body simply reacted. It was the fierce, illogical, overwhelming drive of a mother who couldn't stand to see another life stolen by the darkness that had shattered her own. She surged forward, ignoring the pain in her feet. She cut across the dining room, nearly colliding with a busboy. "Excuse me," she breathed, pushing past. The waiter was placing the plate down in front of Nikolai. The aroma of tomato and basil wafted up. Nikolai picked up his fork. Clara reached the table just as the fork touched the pasta. "No!" The scream tore through her throat, louder than she intended. She didn't stop. She lunged, her hand striking the edge of the hot ceramic plate. Crash. The sound was like a gunshot in the hushed restaurant. The plate shattered against the hardwood floor. Red sauce splattered across Nikolai's pristine charcoal suit. Pasta lay in a ruined heap on his polished shoes. The entire restaurant went dead silent. The music seemed to stop. Forks froze mid-air. Victor, the bodyguard, moved with blurring speed. Before Clara could draw a breath, a heavy hand clamped onto her shoulder, forcing her to her knees. She gasped, the pain sharp, but she didn't fight back. Nikolai Volkov didn't move. He didn't flinch. He slowly lowered his fork to the table, the metal clicking against the wood. He looked down at the mess on his shoes, then, slowly, terrifyingly, raised his eyes to meet Clara's. His eyes were gray, like the winter sky before a blizzard. There was no anger in them yet, only a cold, calculating curiosity that was far worse. "Give me one reason," Nikolai said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in the air. "Why I shouldn't have you removed from this earth before you can blink." Clara trembled, but she didn't look away. She thought of David. She thought of the scar on the man's neck in the kitchen. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking but audible. "Don't eat it." Victor tightened his grip. "Boss, she's crazy. I'll take her out back." "Wait," Nikolai commanded. He leaned forward, inspecting Clara's face. He was a man who specialized in reading lies, in sniffing out deceit. He looked for the dilation of pupils, the sweat on the brow, the twitch of a muscle. He saw fear, yes. But beneath the fear, he saw a desperate, pleading honesty. "Why?" Nikolai asked. "I saw them," Clara said, tears pricking her eyes. "In the kitchen. The chef is gone. There are two men. One has a scar on his neck. I saw him put something in the sauce, a vial. 3 drops. Nikolai went very still. The air around the table thickened with tension. He looked at the ruined food on the floor. He looked at the sauce on his cuff. "Victor," Nikolai said softly, "go to the kitchen, quietly." Victor hesitated, looking between the threat of the woman and the order from his boss. "Boss, I can't leave you unprotected. If she wanted to kill me, she wouldn't have slapped the poison out of my hand," Nikolai reasoned, never breaking eye contact with Clara. "Go." Victor released Clara and vanished toward the kitchen. Clara remained kneeling, her chest heaving. "I have a daughter," she blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. I couldn't let it happen. I know what it looks like when someone is taken away." Nikolai reached into his jacket pocket. Clara flinched, closing her eyes. When she opened them, he was offering her a napkin. "Stand up," he said. It wasn't a request. Clara pulled herself up, her knees shaking. The silence in the restaurant was suffocating. Every patron was watching, terrified. A commotion erupted from the kitchen. Shouting, the crash of metal. Then, the heavy thud of the back door slamming. Victor returned a moment later, breathless, his suit jacket unbuttoned. He walked straight to Nikolai and whispered in his ear. Nikolai listened, his expression unchanging, though his jaw tightened imperceptibly. "They're gone," Nikolai said aloud, looking at Clara. "And the back alley camera confirms a vehicle fleeing." He stood up, towering over Clara. He picked up a piece of the pasta from the floor with a napkin, wrapping it carefully. "You said you have a daughter?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "Emily. She's 6. "Where is she?" "With my neighbor, Mrs. Gable." Nikolai buttoned his jacket. "Get your coat." "You're done working for the night." I can't leave," Clara stammered. "Mr. Henderson will fire me." Nikolai looked over Clara's shoulder at the trembling manager who was peeking out from behind the bar. "Mr. Henderson," Nikolai called out. The manager jumped. "This woman just saved my life. If she is fired, I will be very disappointed. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, yes, Mr. Volkov. Of course," Henderson squeaked. Nikolai turned back to Clara. "Come with me." "Where?" "To get your daughter," Nikolai said, his voice dropping to a serious, almost gentle tone that terrified her more than his anger. "Those men saw you, didn't they?" Clara nodded slowly. "Then they know you saw them," Nikolai said. "You are a witness to an attempted assassination on a head of the family. You and your daughter are no longer safe in this city. Not without me." The ride in the back of the armored SUV was silent. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, streaks of red and gold that felt like distant memories. Clara sat pressed against the door, her hands clenched in her lap. She had just kidnapped herself. That's what it felt like. Nikolai sat on the other side of the leather bench seat, typing furiously on a secure phone. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a CEO handling a merger, except the currency was life and death. "We need to assess the threat level," Nikolai said, not looking up. "My security team is sweeping your apartment building now. We will pick up your daughter and then proceed to a secure location." "You can't just uproot our lives," Clara said, finding a spark of courage. "I have bills. Emily has school. I can't just disappear with someone like you." Nikolai stopped typing. He turned his head slowly. The interior light of the car cast shadows across his sharp cheekbones. "Someone like me?" he repeated. "And what is someone like me, Clara?" "Dangerous," she said. "Tonight, I was the prey, not the predator," Nikolai replied. "You saw the vial. Do you know what was likely in it?" Clara shook her head. "Aconite. Or perhaps a concentrated digitalis derivative. Heart failure. Mimics a natural death. If you hadn't slapped that plate, I would be dead within the hour, and the coroner would have called it a cardiac arrest." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "You recognized the man, the one with the scar." I think so." "Tell me." Clara took a deep breath. 2 years ago. My husband, David. He was an accountant for a logistics firm. He started finding discrepancies, numbers that didn't add up, shipping containers that existed on paper but not in the yard. He went to the warehouse district to meet a source. They found him in an alley. She swallowed the lump in her throat. The police said it was a robbery, but his watch wasn't taken. His wallet was there. Just his laptop was gone. I went there that night. Before the police arrived, I was looking for him. I saw a black sedan and a man smoking a cigarette under a streetlight, watching the scene. He had a scar, right here. She traced a line down her neck. Nikolai's expression darkened. "David Mitchell," he murmured. "The forensic accountant." Clara looked at him, shocked. "You knew him?" "I didn't know him," Nikolai said. "But I knew of the accident. It happened in territory controlled by the Salieri Syndicate. My rivals." He looked out the window. "It seems, Clara, that our enemies are the same. The man you saw tonight was likely a cleaner for the Salieri family, which means someone in my organization let them in." The car slowed to a halt in front of a rundown apartment complex. It was Clara's home. "Victor is already upstairs," Nikolai said. "Go get your daughter. Pack a bag, essentials only. You have 5 minutes. And if I refuse? Then I will leave a security detail here," Nikolai said. "But my men are human. They can make mistakes. If the Salieri cleaners come back to finish the job, and they will, because they don't leave loose ends, they will come for the waitress who saw their faces. Can you gamble your daughter's life on that?" Clara looked at the grim building, the flickering street lamp, the vulnerability of her existence. She realized she had been running from this shadow for 2 years. Tonight, she had just run straight into it. 5 minutes, she said, opening the door. 10 minutes later, Clara returned. She held a small pink suitcase in one hand and the hand of a sleepy, confused 6-year-old in the other. Emily was clutching a worn-out stuffed bear. Victor helped them into the car. Emily looked at Nikolai with wide, curious eyes. Most children would be scared of the stern man in the dark suit, but Emily had a strange, intuitive fearlessness. "Are you a policeman?" Emily asked, her voice small. Nikolai looked at the child. For a second, the mask of the crime lord slipped. A flicker of pain crossed his face, a memory of innocence lost. "No," Nikolai said gently. "I am a problem solver." "Mommy says we have to go on a trip," Emily said. "Yes," Nikolai nodded. "A vacation. To a very big house." As the car pulled away, merging onto the highway that led out of the city and toward the affluent, secluded estates of the North Shore, Nikolai's phone buzzed. He read the text message. His jaw tightened. Analysis confirmed. Pure aconite. Lethal dose. The kitchen staff has vanished. Marcus is not answering his phone. Nikolai looked at Clara, who was stroking Emily's hair as the child fell back asleep. "You were right," Nikolai said quietly. "It was poison." Clara didn't say, "I told you so." She just stared out into the dark. "Who is Marcus?" Nikolai looked at her sharply. "How did you know to ask about him?" "You just looked at your phone and got angry," Clara observed. "And earlier, you asked Victor where his second was. You're wondering who let the killers in." Nikolai let out a short, dry chuckle. "You are observant, Clara. That is a dangerous quality. It's a survival skill," she retorted. "Marcus," Nikolai said, "is my lieutenant, my right hand. The man who was supposed to vet the kitchen staff tonight." The betrayal hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Nikolai Volkov was the most powerful man in Chicago. But in that moment, sitting in a bulletproof car with a waitress and a child, he realized he was entirely alone. Except for them. The Volkov estate was not a house. It was a compound. Surrounded by 12-foot stone walls topped with iron spikes and sensors, it sat on 10 acres of manicured land overlooking Lake Michigan. As the heavy iron gates swung open, Clara felt a chill. It was beautiful, yes. The driveway was lined with ancient oaks, and the main house was a sprawling masterpiece of modern architecture, glass, steel, and dark stone. But it felt like a prison, a very expensive prison. "Welcome to the fortress," Nikolai said dryly as the car stopped. Servants, or perhaps they were more guards in suits, came to take the bags. Clara held on to Emily's hand tightly. "We will be staying in the East Wing," Nikolai instructed the head of household, a stern woman named Elena. "Prepare the guest suite, and set up a room for the child next to it. Verify all perimeter alarms. No one comes in or out without my direct biometric authorization." "Understood, sir," Elena said, eyeing Clara with suspicion. Inside, the house was silent and cold. The furniture was minimal, the art on the walls abstract and severe. There were no family photos, no signs of life. "You live here alone?" Clara asked as they walked up the grand staircase. "Privacy is a luxury," Nikolai replied. "It looks lonely," Emily piped up. Clara squeezed Emily's hand. "Emily, shh." Nikolai stopped on the stairs. He turned to look at the little girl. "It is quiet, yes, but quiet is safe." "My daddy is quiet," Emily said matter-of-factly. "He's in heaven. Mommy says he's watching us." Nikolai's face softened again. He looked at Clara. "Does she remember him?" "A little," Clara said. "She remembers he used to sing to her." Nikolai nodded and continued walking. He led them to a suite that was larger than Clara's entire apartment. "This is your area. It has everything you need. Food will be brought to you. Do not leave the estate grounds. Do not answer the landlines if they ring. Do not go near the windows at night." "How long?" Clara asked, standing in the doorway. "How long do we have to stay here?" "Until I find the people who tried to kill me," Nikolai said. "And until I ensure they don't know who you are. And if they already know, then I kill them," Nikolai said simply. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we work." "Work? You have a memory for faces, Clara. You saw the men. I have security footage, files, dossiers. Tomorrow you are going to help me identify the rot in my organization." He turned to leave, but stopped. "Thank you," he said, his back to her. "For what?" "For not looking away." He closed the door. Clara sank onto the massive bed, the adrenaline finally crashing. She looked at Emily, who was bouncing on the mattress, delighted by the luxury. "Mommy, this bed is like a cloud." Clara forced a smile. "It is, sweetie." But as she looked around the room, she noticed the details. The windows were reinforced glass. The door had a heavy lock. There were cameras in the hallway. She walked to the window and looked out at the grounds. Below, men with dogs were patrolling the perimeter. She had saved a monster's life. And now, she was living in his belly. But as she thought about the man with the scar, the man who killed David, a cold resolve settled in her chest. The police hadn't helped her. The system hadn't helped her. Maybe, just maybe, a monster was exactly what she needed to finally get justice. Downstairs in his study, Nikolai poured a glass of amber liquid. He didn't drink it. He stared at the monitors on his wall. One screen showed the guest room. He watched Clara tuck Emily in. He opened a drawer and pulled out a faded photograph. It was of a young boy and a girl laughing in the snow. "I won't let it happen again, Katya," he whispered to the girl in the photo. "I won't lose another innocent." His phone rang. It was Marcus. Nikolai stared at the name on the screen. The man who had been like a brother to him. The man who had just tried to poison him. Nikolai picked up the phone. His voice was calm, deadly. "Marcus, where are you?" "Sorry, boss." Marcus's voice came through, crackling. "Bad signal. Just wrapping up business. Heading your way." "Don't hurry," Nikolai said. "I'm just enjoying a late dinner." He hung up. The game had begun, and this time he had a secret weapon. A waitress who saw everything. End of part 1. In the next part, Clara steps into the world of shadows, using her memory to hunt down the traitors. But as she gets closer to Nikolai, she discovers that the line between good and evil is far blurrier than she thought, and the threat is already inside the house. The morning sun hit the Volkov estate with a deceptive brilliance, turning the frost on the lawn into millions of tiny diamonds. Inside the high-security kitchen, the atmosphere was less sparkling. Clara stood by the massive marble island, making toast. It was a mundane act in an extraordinary setting. She was wearing a plush robe that the housekeeper, Elena, had provided. It was 3 sizes too big, making her look even more fragile than she was. Emily sat at the counter, swinging her legs, happily devouring a bowl of cereal that cost more per box than Clara used to spend on a week of groceries. "Mommy, the milk tastes like vanilla," Emily chirped. "It's almond milk, sweetie," Clara said, forcing a smile. Her eyes kept darting to the doorway. Nikolai entered a moment later. He was dressed in a fresh suit, navy blue this time, his hair wet from a shower. He stopped when he saw them. It was clear he wasn't used to seeing domestic scenes in his fortress. He looked at the box of cereal, then at the toast, then at Clara. "The chef could have made you anything," Nikolai said, walking to the coffee machine. "Eggs Benedict, crepes, steak. I prefer to make my own food," Clara said, her voice steady. Considering what happened last night, Nikolai paused, the coffee cup halfway to his lips. He nodded once, acknowledging the point. "Fair enough. He leaned against the counter, sipping his black coffee. My security team has been scrubbing the footage from the restaurant. They have stills of the two men in the kitchen. I need you in the study. Can Emily come? No, Nikolai said. What we are looking at is not for children. Clara hesitated. I can't leave her. Elena will watch her, Nikolai assured her. Elena raised me. She is formidable, but safe. After a tense introduction where Emily was bribed with the promise of a heated indoor pool, Clara followed Nikolai down a long corridor to the west wing. The study was more like a command center. Screens covered one wall, displaying live feeds of the estate perimeter, stock market tickers, and encrypted chat logs. In the center of the room was a mahogany desk cluttered with files. Sit, Nikolai commanded, pointing to a leather chair. He tapped a keyboard, and the large central screen flickered to life. It showed a grainy, zoomed-in image of the restaurant kitchen. Is this him? Nikolai asked. Clara leaned forward. The image showed a man in a profile view. The scar on his neck was visible, jagged and white against his skin. Yes, Clara said, her breath catching. That's him, the one with the vial. His name is Alexei Durov, Nikolai said, his voice cold. A freelance enforcer. He usually works for the highest bidder. But lately, he's been seen in the company of the Salieri family. He swiped the screen. Another photo appeared. This one showed the second man, the one who had been prepping the pasta. I don't know him, Clara said. That, Nikolai said, is a low-level dealer named Soto. He's nobody. Disposable muscle. Nikolai paced the room. The question is not who they are. I know who they are now. The question is how they knew. How they knew what? My schedule, Nikolai said. I don't have a routine. I decide where to eat 30 minutes before I go. Only 3 people knew I was going to the Gilded Olive last night. My driver, Victor, and my lieutenant, Marcus. Clara watched him. You suspect Marcus. Marcus and I grew up together, Nikolai said, staring at the screen. We starved together on these streets. We built this empire from nothing. To suspect him is to suspect my own right arm. But you do suspect him, Clara pressed. That's why you didn't tell him I'm here. Nikolai turned to her. You said your husband was an accountant. You said he found discrepancies. Yes. I have retrieved the hard drives from my logistics company, Nikolai said, gesturing to a stack of drives on the desk. This is the business Marcus runs for me. Ostensibly, we ship luxury cars and electronics, legitimate imports. Ostensibly? Clara asked. I am a criminal, Clara, not a liar. We smuggle untaxed goods, but I have rules. No drugs, no weapons, and absolutely no human trafficking. Those are lines I do not cross. He pushed a laptop toward her. If Marcus is betraying me, the money trail will prove it. You lived with a forensic accountant for 10 years. You said you helped him sometimes? I organized his files, Clara said. I know what he looked for. Double invoicing, shell companies, weight discrepancies. Look, Nikolai said. Find me the lie. For the next 4 hours, the room was silent, except for the clicking of keys. Clara forgot her fear. She fell into a trance of numbers and spreadsheets. It was a language she understood. It was the language David had taught her late at night, when he couldn't sleep, worried about what he had found. Nikolai worked silently beside her, reviewing security protocols. Suddenly, Clara stopped. Here, she whispered. Nikolai was at her side in an instant. What is it? The shipping weights, Clara said, pointing at a column of data. Look at these shipments coming in from Eastern Europe. They are labeled as auto parts. The weight listed on the manifest is 4,500 kilograms per container. Standard for engine blocks, Nikolai noted. Yes, Clara said. But look at the fuel consumption of the trucks hauling them out of the port. It's too low. Nikolai frowned. Too low? If a truck is hauling 4,500 kilos, it burns fuel at a specific rate, Clara explained, her finger tracing the line. David taught me this. Heavy loads drag on the engine. But these trucks, the fuel logs show they are burning fuel as if they are hauling something much lighter. Maybe 1,000 kilos, or something that isn't heavy metal, Nikolai finished, his face paling. And look at the destination, Clara continued. They aren't going to your usual warehouses. They are making a detour to a depot in the south side, a depot listed under a company called Aurora Logistics. Nikolai straightened up. He looked like he had been punched. Aurora, he murmured. The dawn. He walked to the window, his back rigid. 2 years ago, the Salieri family approached me. They wanted to use my shipping routes to move special cargo. Refugees. Girls. I told them if they ever brought that filth into my city, I would burn them down. He turned back to Clara, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. Marcus didn't just try to kill me to take my crown, Clara. He tried to kill me because I was in the way. In the way of what? He's been working with Salieri, Nikolai said, his voice dropping to a growl. Those containers aren't empty. They aren't carrying engine blocks. They are smuggling people. And he's using my trucks, my reputation, and my routes to do it. Clara felt sick. That's what David found, she realized. It wasn't just numbers. He found them. Yes, Nikolai said softly. Your husband stumbled onto a trafficking ring operating inside my legitimate business. Marcus had him killed to keep it quiet. And he blamed it on a random mugging. Nikolai walked over to her. For the first time, he didn't look like a boss. He looked like a man burdened by a heavy sin. I am responsible, he said. It happened under my watch. My man killed your husband. Clara stood up. The anger flared, hot and sharp, but it was complicated now. You didn't know. Ignorance is not an excuse for a king, Nikolai said bitterly. I owe you a debt, Clara Mitchell, a debt of blood. The phone on the desk buzzed. A red light flashed. Nikolai picked it up. He listened for a second, then his eyes snapped to Clara. He's here, Nikolai said. Who? Marcus. He's at the gate. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Clara's chest. He's here? Does he know? He knows I'm alive, Nikolai said, his demeanor shifting instantly. The vulnerable man vanished. The warlord returned. He buttoned his jacket, checking the gun holstered beneath his arm. He likely thinks the poison failed or I didn't eat it yet. He's coming to check on me, to see if I'm sick, to see if I'm vulnerable. What do we do? Clara asked. You, Nikolai said, pointing to a bookshelf that looked built into the wall, are going to hide. He walked over to the shelf and pulled a specific book, The Count of Monte Cristo. The shelf clicked and swung open silently, revealing a small, dark panic room. It has a one-way mirror looking into the office, Nikolai explained quickly. And an audio feed. Go inside. Take the laptop. Keep looking for proof. I need to know exactly how deep this goes before I make my move. But Emily! Emily is in the East Wing with Elena and Victor. Marcus won't go there. He's coming here to business. Nikolai gently pushed her toward the hidden door. Clara, listen to me. No matter what you hear, do not make a sound. If things go wrong, there is a tunnel in the back of that room. It leads to the boathouse. Take Emily and run. Nikolai, go. He closed the bookshelf. Clara was plunged into dim light. She saw Nikolai through the glass. He sat behind his desk, opened a file, and poured himself a drink. He looked relaxed, bored even. A moment later, the heavy oak doors of the study opened. A man walked in. He was charming, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He wore a suit that was too flashy, a gold watch glinting on his wrist. This was Marcus. "Nico!" Marcus boomed, spreading his arms. "I was worried. You weren't answering your phone." "I was busy," Nikolai said calmly, not standing up. "Cleaning up a mess at the restaurant." Clara watched from the darkness, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pressed the headphones to her ears to hear the conversation clearly. "A mess?" Marcus asked, sitting down uninvited. "What happened?" "Clumsy staff," Nikolai lied smoothly. "Spilled dinner all over me. Ruined my appetite." Marcus's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "That's a shame. The Gilded Olive usually has impeccable service." "Indeed," Nikolai said, swirling his drink. "Strange thing, though. The chef was missing. And the staff, they looked new. Is that so?" Marcus leaned back, crossing his legs. "Hard to find good help these days. Maybe we should buy the place, fix it up." "Maybe," Nikolai agreed. "So, why are you here, Marcus? You usually don't come to the fortress unless the house is on fire." "Business, Nico. The shipment from Odessa. It's stuck in customs. I need your authorization to bribe the port authority." "Odessa?" Nikolai repeated. "That's the auto parts shipment?" "Yeah. Engines. Heavy load," Nikolai noted. "Must be expensive to move. You know how it is. Gas prices." Marcus laughed nervously. In the panic room, Clara looked at the laptop screen. She pulled up the Odessa file. She frantically clicked through the manifests. She found a subfolder labeled Biologicals. She opened it. Photos. Hundreds of photos. Not of engines, but of young women and children. Clara clamped her hand over her mouth to stop a scream. The nausea hit her in a wave. This wasn't just smuggling. This was slavery. She looked up through the glass. Marcus was smiling, joking with his oldest friend, while holding the keys to a kingdom built on human misery. "Sign the authorization, Nico," Marcus said, sliding a paper across the desk. "Let's get the goods moving. We lose money every hour they sit there." Nikolai picked up a pen. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at Marcus. "Do you remember Katya?" Nikolai asked suddenly. The air in the room changed. Marcus stiffened. "Your sister?" "Of course. Why bring her up?" "I was thinking about the day she died," Nikolai said softly. "It was a stray bullet. A drive-by meant for me. She was just there, innocent. She had nothing to do with this life. It was a tragedy, Nico. We avenged her." "We did," Nikolai nodded. "But I made a vow that day, that I would never let our business hurt women or children. That we were criminals, yes, but we were not monsters." Nikolai put the pen down. He didn't sign. "Why are the trucks burning so little fuel, Marcus?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's smile evaporated completely. His eyes went dead. "You've been checking the logs," Marcus said quietly. "I have." "That's unlike you. You usually trust me to handle the logistics." "Trust is earned, Marcus, and it is easily lost." Nikolai leaned forward. "What is in the containers?" Marcus sighed. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds. "The world is changing, Nikolai. The old ways, the honorable thief. That's a fairy tale. The real money isn't in cars or protection. It's in movement. Moving people who want to be moved, or who need to be moved." "Trafficking." Nikolai spat the word like a curse. "Supply and demand," Marcus countered. "Salieri offered us a partnership. 50-50. It's millions a month, Nico. Enough to buy this city. Enough to make us untouchable." "I am already untouchable," Nikolai said, standing up. "And I don't sell people." "Then you're a dinosaur," Marcus sneered. He turned around. His hand hovered near his jacket pocket. "And dinosaurs go extinct." Clara watched, terrified. She saw Marcus's hand inching toward a weapon. "Don't do it, Marcus," Nikolai warned, his voice low. "I love you like a brother, Nico," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "But you're in the way. You're soft. You let a waitress slap a plate out of your hand, and you didn't even kill her. You're losing your edge." "The waitress saw you," Nikolai said. "I know," Marcus replied. "And that's why she has to die too." "Where is she, Nico?" "I know you took her." "She is gone," Nikolai lied. "On a plane to Europe." "Liar," Marcus hissed. "You brought her here. I can smell her cheap perfume." Clara looked down at her robe. She wasn't wearing perfume. He was bluffing. Or he was guessing. "Get out of my house," Nikolai said. "I'm leaving," Marcus said. He backed toward the door. "But this isn't over. The Salieris are tired of waiting. And I'm tired of asking for permission." He opened the door. "Watch your back, brother. The food isn't the only thing that might be poisoned." Marcus slammed the door. Nikolai stood still for a long moment. Then he slumped back into his chair, rubbing his temples. He tapped the desk. "You can come out." The bookshelf swung open. Clara stumbled out, clutching the laptop. She was shaking. "He admits it," she whispered. "He admits everything." "He thinks he has the upper hand," Nikolai said. "He thinks I am alone here. Are you?" "No," Nikolai looked at her. "I have you." "I found the photos," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. She turned the laptop around. "Nikolai, they have children. Dozens of them. In the containers at the port." Nikolai looked at the screen. His face turned to stone. The gray eyes that had been cold before were now burning with a white-hot rage. "Then we don't just defend ourselves," Nikolai said. "We go to war." Night fell over the estate like a heavy shroud. The tension in the house was palpable. Victor had doubled the guard. Every light in the perimeter was on. In the guest suite, Clara was trying to keep Emily calm. "Why are the men outside running with dogs?" Emily asked, looking out the window. "They're just playing a game," Clara lied. "Come away from the window, baby." There was a knock on the door. Clara jumped. It was Nikolai. He had changed into tactical gear, black cargo pants, a fitted black sweater, a holster on his thigh. He looked dangerous. "We need to move," he said. "What's happening?" "Marcus isn't waiting," Nikolai said. "My sensors picked up a jamming signal. They are cutting our comms. They're coming tonight." "Here? To the fortress?" "He knows the layout," Nikolai said grimly. "He designed the security system with me. He knows the blind spots." "Where do we go?" "The panic room in the study is good for a short time. But if they breach the house, they can smoke us out. We need to get to the boathouse. I have a boat prepped. It will take us down the lake to a safe house in Wisconsin." "Okay." Clara grabbed her bag. She picked up Emily. "We're ready." They moved into the hallway. The house was dark, lit only by the emergency red strip lighting near the floor. It felt like the inside of a submarine. Victor met them at the stairs. "Boss, they breached the north gate. 3 SUVs, heavily armed." "How many?" "At least 12. Looks like Salieri hit squad mixed with Marcus's loyalists." "Hold the main hall," Nikolai ordered. "Buy us time." "It's been an honor, sir," Victor said, racking the slide of his rifle. "Don't die, Victor. That's an order." Nikolai led Clara and Emily toward the kitchen, aiming for the servants' exit that led to the gardens. As they reached the kitchen, the glass of the French doors shattered. Crash! 2 men in black tactical gear swung in on ropes. Before they could land, Nikolai raised his pistol. Pop, pop. 2 shots, controlled, precise. Both men dropped. Clara screamed, shielding Emily's eyes. "Don't look!" Clara cried. "Emily, look at Mommy! Just look at Mommy!" "Move!" Nikolai shouted, grabbing Clara's arm. They sprinted out into the cold night air. The noise was chaotic now, gunfire erupting from the front of the house, shouting, the barking of dogs. They ran through the manicured gardens, ducking behind hedges. Nikolai moved with a terrifying grace, his gun scanning every shadow. Clara ran until her lungs burned, carrying Emily, who was now sobbing, into her shoulder. "Almost there," Nikolai panted. "The boathouse is just past the tree line." Suddenly, a spotlight blinded them. A helicopter. It was hovering low over the lake, its searchlight sweeping the grounds. "They have air support!" Clara yelled over the roar of the rotors. "Salieri has friends in high places." Nikolai grit his teeth. "Get to the trees!" They dove into the wooded area, just as bullets chewed up the grass where they had been standing. They crouched behind a massive oak tree. Nikolai checked his magazine. "I can't get you to the boat," he realized. "The chopper will see us on the dock. It's a suicide run." "So we're trapped," Clara whispered. Nikolai looked at her. Then he looked at Emily. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small, heavy key. "There is an old storm drain," Nikolai said, 50 yards east. It leads to the old wine cellar under the main house. It's reinforced concrete. Safe. We're going back in?" "No," Nikolai said. He looked at her with an intensity that stopped her heart. "You are going in. I am going to draw them away." "No!" Clara grabbed his arm. "You'll be killed." "If I stay with you, we all die," Nikolai said. "Marcus wants me. If I run toward the boat, the chopper will follow me. The ground team will follow me. You can slip into the drain. Nikolai, please." He reached out and touched her face. His hand was warm, rough, and surprisingly gentle. "You saved my life in the restaurant, Clara. Now let me save yours." He looked at Emily. "Be brave, little one." Then, without waiting for an answer, Nikolai broke cover. He sprinted toward the boathouse, firing his weapon into the air, screaming a challenge at the helicopter. "Over here! Come and get it!" The spotlight swung toward him. The gunfire shifted, chasing him. Clara watched him run, a lone figure against the might of an army. "Come on!" she sobbed, pulling Emily. They scrambled through the mud to the iron grate of the storm drain. Clara fumbled with the key Nikolai had given her. Her hands were shaking. The gunfire was getting louder. Click. The grate swung open. She pushed Emily inside, then scrambled in after her, pulling the grate shut just as a group of men ran past, shouting instructions to follow the target toward the lake. In the darkness of the drain, smelling of damp earth and rust, Clara held Emily tight. She listened to the war raging above. She realized then that Nikolai wasn't just a mob boss. He was a man who had been waiting for something worth dying for. And tonight, he had decided that something was them. The storm drain was not built for human travel. It was a cylindrical throat of concrete, slick with moss and smelling of old rain and decay. Clara crawled on her hands and knees, the rough surface scraping her skin raw. Emily clung to her back, her small arms wrapped tightly around Clara's neck, her face buried in Clara's coat. "I don't like it here, Mommy," Emily whimpered, her voice echoing in the damp tunnel. "It's dark. I know, baby," Clara whispered, fighting the urge to scream herself. "We're almost there. Just like the rabbits in your storybook, remember? We're going into the burrow where the wolves can't find us." Above them, the muffled thud of explosions vibrated through the earth. Dust trickled down from the cracks in the ceiling. Nikolai was up there, dying. The thought made Clara crawl faster. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a square, brick-lined chamber. At the far end was a heavy steel door with a wheel handle, like a submarine hatch. Clara scrambled toward it. She placed Emily on the dry floor. "Stand back, Em." Clara grabbed the wheel. It was cold and rusted. She gritted her teeth and pulled. It didn't budge. "Please," she begged the metal. "Please." She thought of the man with the scar. She thought of David lying in the alley. She thought of Nikolai running into the spotlight to draw the fire away from them. She put her entire body weight into it, screaming with effort. With a screech of protesting metal, the wheel turned. Clara spun it until the latch disengaged, then pushed the heavy door open. They stumbled inside. It wasn't a wine cellar. The room was vast, climate-controlled, and lined not with bottles, but with servers. Rows of black computer towers hummed with blue lights. In the center was a single desk with 3 monitors and a satellite phone. This wasn't a basement. It was a brain. The central nervous system of Nikolai's empire. "Wow," Emily breathed, forgetting her fear for a second. "Look at the lights." Clara locked the heavy steel door behind them. She spun the wheel, sealing them in. For the first time in hours, the air was still. The noise of the battle outside was gone, replaced by the low hum of cooling fans. Clara rushed to the desk. The monitors were asleep. She shook the mouse. The screens flared to life. The center screen showed a map of the estate with red and green dots moving. The left screen showed live camera feeds. The right screen was a command terminal asking for a password. Clara looked at the camera feeds. Her heart stopped. One feed showed the boathouse. It was in flames. Another feed showed the dock. Nikolai was there. He was crouched behind a stack of crates, his weapon drawn. He was bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, his black sweater stained darker. Pinned down. 50 yards away, near the tree line, Marcus stood behind a line of armed men. He was shouting something, but there was no audio. "He's alive," Clara sobbed. "He's still alive." She looked at the command terminal. "Enter," passphrase. She didn't know it. "Think, Clara," she told herself. "You're good at patterns. You're good at numbers." She tried Nikolai's birthday. Access denied. She tried the name of the restaurant. Access denied. She tried Katya. Access denied. A red timer appeared on the screen. System lockout in 3 attempts. If she locked the system, she couldn't help him. She looked around the room for a clue. There were no sticky notes, no hints. This was a fortress of secrets. Then she saw it. On the desk, next to the keyboard, was a small framed photo. It was the same photo she had seen Nikolai holding earlier, the boy and the girl in the snow. But there was something else. A small brass plaque on the frame. It had a date engraved on it. 1204, 1998. The day Katya died? No, Nikolai looked too young in the photo. That was a happy memory. The last happy memory. Clara typed in 12/4/1998. Access denied. Clara's hands shook. 1 attempt left. She looked at the photo again. She looked at Emily, who was sitting on the floor, drawing with her finger on the dusty carpet. "Mommy, look," Emily said. "The boy in the picture has a snow fort." Clara looked closer. In the background of the photo, behind the children, was a sign on a building. It was blurry, partially obscured by snow. It read, Volkov Bakery. Nikolai had told her they starved on the streets. But this photo, this was before the streets. This was before the crime. This was their origin. Clara closed her eyes. What was the one thing Nikolai valued above all else? Above money? Above power? Family? But in Russian. She remembered David telling her once that passwords should be words that mean something in your mother tongue. She didn't speak Russian. Wait. Earlier, in the car, Nikolai had said a phrase when he looked at the photo of his sister. He had whispered it. Moy angel. My angel. Clara typed it in. Moyangel. The screen flashed green. Access granted. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. The system opened up. It wasn't just security controls. It was everything. Bank accounts, blackmail files, shipping routes, and the PA system. She had the voice of God. Now she just had to figure out what to say. On the dock, The air smelled of gasoline and impending death. Nikolai Volkov checked his weapon. Empty. He reached for his backup magazine. 2 rounds left. His shoulder burned like fire where the bullet had grazed him. He was dizzy from blood loss. "Give it up, Nico!" Marcus shouted from the safety of the trees. "It's over. The helicopter has thermal. We know the girl isn't with you. We'll find them after we deal with you." Nikolai closed his eyes. He had bought them 10 minutes. Hopefully, it was enough. "Come and finish it, Marcus!" Nikolai yelled back, his voice hoarse. "Or are you too cowardly to pull the trigger yourself?" "Suppressing fire," Marcus ordered. The wooden crates around Nikolai splintered as a hail of bullets tore into them. He curled into a ball, waiting for the inevitable. Suddenly, a screech of feedback tore through the night air. It was so loud that the gunmen stopped firing, covering their ears. The external speakers, hidden in the trees on the boathouse along the perimeter, crackled to life. "Marcus!" The voice was female, trembling but loud, amplified to a deafening volume. Nikolai's eyes widened. "Clara." Marcus looked around wildly. "Who is that? Cut the feed." "I can't!" one of his men shouted. "It's hardwired from the bunker." Clara's voice boomed across the estate again. "Marcus, listen to me carefully. I am in the server room. I have access to the Ouroboros file." On the dock, Nikolai froze. He didn't have an Ouroboros file. She was bluffing. "I see the transfers, Marcus," Clara continued, her voice gaining strength. "The payments from the Salieri family, the offshore accounts in the Caymans, but more importantly, I see the insurance file Nikolai kept on you." Marcus signaled his men to hold fire. "She's lying!" he screamed, but there was fear in his voice. "Find the vent. Gas them out." "If you take one more step toward him," Clara threatened, "I hit send. I have a direct upload queued to the FBI Cybercrimes Division and the Salieri private server." "So what?" Marcus laughed nervously. "You think I'm scared of the feds?" "I'm not sending them the trafficking evidence, Marcus," Clara said. And then she improvised the most brilliant lie of her life. "I'm sending the Salieris the proof that you have been skimming from them. 10% off the top of every shipment for the last 2 years." Silence fell over the battlefield. In the criminal underworld, being a snitch was bad, but stealing from your partners, that was a death sentence, especially from the Salieri family. They skinned people for stealing $1, let alone millions. "That's a lie!" Marcus shrieked. But his men, the Salieri mercenaries, lowered their weapons slightly. They looked at Marcus with sudden suspicion. "Check the ledger, Marcus," Clara said, her fingers flying across the keyboard in the bunker. She wasn't sending anything to the Salieris. She didn't have their address. But she was manipulating the estate's lighting system. "You have 10 seconds to drop your weapons," Clara announced. "Or I send the file. And then the Salieri hit squad won't be looking at Nikolai. They'll be looking at you." "Kill him!" Marcus screamed at the mercenaries. "Kill him now!" The mercenaries didn't move. The leader, a masked man, turned to Marcus. "Is it true? Have you been skimming?" "No. She's the waitress. She knows nothing." "I have the bank routing numbers." Clara read them out over the speakers. She was reading Marcus's legitimate payroll account numbers, but in the heat of the moment, they sounded like damning evidence. 10, Clara counted down. 9. Kill her! Marcus pulled his own gun and aimed it at the house. 8. Clara hit a command on the keyboard. Floodlights. Strobe mode. Instantly, the entire estate began to flash. The massive perimeter lights pulsed rapidly. Blind darkness. Blinding white. Blind darkness. It was disorienting. It induced nausea. "Now! Nikolai!" Clara screamed over the PA. Nikolai didn't hesitate. He knew the layout of his dock even in the dark. He rolled out from cover, not firing at the mercenaries, but firing at the fuel tank of the burning boat next to the dock. Boom! The explosion was massive. It knocked Marcus and his men off their feet. The shockwave tore through the trees. Nikolai dove into the water. "Retreat!" the mercenary leader yelled. "It's a trap! Pull back!" "No! Stand your ground!" Marcus screamed, scrambling in the mud. But the mercenaries were mercenaries. They fought for money, not for suicidal loyalty. Between the potential betrayal by Marcus and the chaos of the exploding dock, the equation had changed. They cut their losses. The SUVs roared to life. The helicopter banked away, abandoning the mission. Marcus was left alone on the lawn, coughing in the smoke, his gun waving uselessly at the strobe lights. In the water, Nikolai surfaced under the pier. He dragged himself up the ladder, shivering, bleeding, but alive. He limped toward the house. He found Marcus trying to hotwire one of the remaining cars. Nikolai didn't run. He walked. Slow. Deliberate. The strobe lights flashed, making his movement look like a stop-motion horror movie. Marcus looked up. He saw Nikolai emerging from the smoke like a revenant. "Nico," Marcus stammered, backing up. It was just business." Nikolai didn't speak. He walked up to Marcus, who raised his gun. Nikolai slapped the gun away with his good hand, a move that echoed Clara slapping the plate. He struck Marcus once, hard, across the jaw. Marcus crumbled. Nikolai stood over him, breathing heavily. The speakers crackled one last time. "Nikolai?" Clara's voice was small now. "Are you okay?" Nikolai looked up at the security camera mounted on the garage. He raised a bloody hand in acknowledgement. He looked down at Marcus. He could end it right here. He should end it right here. But then he heard the sirens. Distant, but getting closer. The explosion had drawn the real police. "You're lucky," Nikolai whispered to the unconscious Marcus. "Death is too easy for you." He dragged Marcus by the collar, zip-tied his hands with a plastic tie from the garden shed, and left him in the driveway for the authorities. Attached to Marcus's lapel, Nikolai placed a flash drive he pulled from his pocket, the real evidence of the trafficking. Nikolai limped toward the storm drain entrance. He had to get Clara and Emily out before the police arrived. The police in this district were on Salieri's payroll. They couldn't be found here. He spun the wheel of the bunker door. It opened. Clara stood there, pale and trembling. Emily was asleep on the floor, exhausted. Nikolai looked at Clara. He looked at the monitors where she had orchestrated his survival. "You lied to them," Nikolai rasped, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I learned from the best," Clara replied, tears finally spilling over. Nikolai collapsed into her arms. For the first time in his life, the wolf was the one being held. The safe house was a cabin made of rough-hewn pine, buried deep in the snowy woods of northern Wisconsin. It was silent, save for the crackling of the fireplace and the wind howling through the evergreens outside. It had been 3 days since the attack at the estate. Nikolai lay on the leather sofa, his shoulder bandaged, staring at the ceiling beams. The fever from the infection had broken that morning, leaving him weak but lucid. For a man who had spent his life controlling everything, every shipment, every meeting, every breath in a room, this helplessness was a new kind of torture. But it was also peaceful. In the kitchen, Clara was chopping vegetables. The rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the knife against the cutting board was a domestic sound that Nikolai had no reference for. He had grown up in orphanages and barracks. He lived in hotels and fortresses. The sound of a mother cooking dinner was a language he had never learned. Emily sat on the rug near the fire, coloring in a book Victor had managed to pack. "Mr. Nikolai?" Emily asked, not looking up. "Just Nikolai," he corrected, his voice raspy. "Are the bad men gone?" Nikolai turned his head to look at her. "Yes, the bad men are in a cage." It was true. The news had been playing on the small television in the corner. Marcus had been arrested by the FBI, found zip-tied in the driveway of the Volkov estate with a flash drive pinned to his jacket, containing evidence of a massive human trafficking ring. The Salieri family was in chaos, their assets frozen, their leadership fleeing the country as the dominoes began to fall. Clara walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. She sat on the edge of the coffee table, looking at him with those perceptive eyes that missed nothing. "You're thinking about going back," she stated. It wasn't a question. Nikolai sighed. "A wolf cannot leave his pack, Clara. The territory is vulnerable. If I don't return to Chicago, the vacuum I left will be filled by someone worse. Someone who doesn't have my rules." "Or," Clara said softly, "you could let it burn. It's not that simple. I have men who depend on me. I have a legacy." "A legacy of what?" Clara challenged him, her voice rising slightly. "Fear? Money? You saw what that legacy brought to your doorstep. It brought death. It brought betrayal." She reached out and touched the bandage on his shoulder. "You told me you wanted to protect the innocent. You can't do that from a throne made of blood." Nikolai looked away. "I don't know how to be anything else. I am Nikolai Volkov. I am the monster of the Midwest. That is all I am." "No," Clara said firmly. "That's who you had to be to survive. But you survived. You won. The question is, what do you do with the victory?" She stood up and went back to the kitchen. "Dinner is in 10 minutes. It's stew. Don't eat it if you think it's poisoned." She offered a small, tired smile. It was a joke. A callback to the moment they met. Nikolai didn't smile. He watched Emily coloring. The little girl hummed a tune, a song her father used to sing. He realized then that he was jealous. Not of David's life, but of David's death. David died a hero, loved by his family, remembered with warmth. If Nikolai died today, who would mourn him? His bodyguards? His accountant? He closed his eyes and made a decision. It was the hardest decision of his life. Harder than pulling a trigger. Harder than ordering a hit. He reached for the burner phone on the table. He dialed a number he had memorized years ago but never intended to use. "Agent Miller," Nikolai said when the line connected. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Volkov, we have a warrant out for you. We assumed you were halfway to Russia." "I'm not in Russia," Nikolai said. "I'm offering you a trade. We don't make deals with kingpins." "You do when the kingpin hands you the keys to the kingdom," Nikolai said calmly. "I will give you everything. The routes, the shell companies, the names of every corrupt judge and politician on the payroll. I will dismantle the entire organization for you." "And what do you want in exchange?" Miller asked, skepticism dripping from his voice. "Immunity?" "No," Nikolai said. "I want a ghost." "A ghost?" "I want Nikolai Volkov to be confirmed dead. I want a death certificate. I want the file closed. And I want 3 new identities, clean ones, with no history." "You want to walk away," Miller realized. "I am already gone," Nikolai said. "Do we have a deal? Or should I call the press and give the story to them?" There was a long pause. Nikolai watched Clara stirring the stew. He watched Emily turn the page of her book. "Where can we meet?" Miller asked. Nikolai gave him the coordinates of an abandoned airfield 10 miles south. He hung up the phone. He felt lighter. The crown was gone. "Clara!" he called out. She turned. "Pack your things," he said. "We have one last stop." 1 year later, the bell above the door chimed, announcing a customer. The small bistro on the coast of Maine smelled of fresh sourdough, rosemary, and the sea. It was a humble place, just 10 tables, exposed brick walls, and a large window overlooking the harbor. "Be right with you," a voice called from the kitchen. A man stepped out. He wore a white apron over a simple flannel shirt. His hair was longer now, softer, less severe. The lines of stress that used to etch his forehead were gone, replaced by laugh lines around his eyes. He wasn't Nikolai Volkov anymore. To the locals, he was Nick, the quiet owner who made the best osso buco in the state. He walked to the counter, wiping his hands. "Table for two?" he asked the couple standing there. "Actually, we're looking for the owner," the woman said. She held a badge. "Health inspector." Nick smiled. A genuine smile. "Everything is up to code. My wife is very strict about cleanliness." "Nick!" Clara walked out from the back office, carrying a stack of invoices. She looked radiant. The shadows under her eyes were gone. She wore her hair down, and there was a calmness about her that hadn't been there a year ago. She saw the inspector and laughed. "Don't let him charm you. Check the fridge temperature. He likes to keep the white wine a degree too warm. It brings out the notes of the grape," Nick argued playfully. As the inspector went into the kitchen, Nick walked around the counter and kissed Clara on the forehead. "Emily is back from school," Clara said softly. "She's doing her homework at table 4. Nick looked over. Emily, now 7 and missing a front tooth, was scribbling furiously in a notebook. He walked over to her. "What are you working on, little bear?" "Math," Emily groaned. "It's hard." Nick sat down opposite her. "Numbers aren't hard. They are just a story. You just have to find the pattern." He picked up a pencil. "Look, if you have 10 apples and you give 3 to your friend." He stopped. He remembered the shipping containers, the weight discrepancies, the numbers that had almost destroyed them, and the numbers that had saved them. "If you give 3 to your friend," Nick corrected himself, "then you have shared something, and that is better than having 10 apples alone." Emily giggled. "That's not math, Nick. That's sharing." "It's the only math that matters," he winked. Later that evening, after the last customer had left, and the closed sign was flipped, Clara and Nick sat on the small patio behind the restaurant, watching the sunset over the Atlantic. Nick poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to Clara. "Do you miss it?" Clara asked suddenly. "Miss what?" "The power, the money, being the man everyone feared." Nick took a sip of wine. He looked at his hands, hands that used to hold guns, now calloused from kneading dough and chopping wood. "I had a dream last night," Nick said. "I was back in the restaurant in Chicago. The plate crashed on the floor. But this time, I didn't stop. I ate the food. And I died." He turned to Clara. "I woke up in a cold sweat. Not because I died, but because in that version of the story, I never met you. I never knew Emily. I died a king, but I died alone." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Clara's breath hitched. "I am not a rich man anymore, Clara," Nick said, opening the box. Inside was a simple ring, vintage with a small sapphire. "I cannot give you a fortress. I cannot give you an army. But I can give you a promise." "What promise?" Clara whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "That I will never eat anything unless you tell me it's safe." Nick grinned. Clara laughed, a sound that was half sob. "You idiot." "And," Nick continued, his face serious again, "that I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be the man you saw when everyone else saw a monster." Clara took the ring. She didn't put it on immediately. She held it tight in her fist. "You aren't a monster, Nick. You never were. You were just a man lost in the dark." She slipped the ring onto her finger. "And I'm glad I found you." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Far away in Chicago, the Volkov estate was empty, seized by the government, and turned into a public park. The name Volkov was fading from memory, a ghost story told to frighten new criminals. But here, in the quiet corner of the world, a family was having dinner. Nick went inside and returned with a bowl of pasta. He set it on the table between them. Osso buco, he said. My own recipe. Clara picked up a fork. She looked at him, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Did you check the sauce? She asked. Nick smiled, the shadows of the past finally, completely gone. I made it myself, he said. With love. Clara took a bite. It's perfect.